I know we were battling to see who got to
I
ask the
know.
first question, and you won. So go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm always get most interested when I hear that an author has spent years researching the thing that they're writing about. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you put in 15 years of research. And to be honest, the book has identified 4 factors basically that have an impact on honesty, justice, and like purpose within an organization or company. What are those? What was that research like?
Well, it was. It didn't start out to be a book. So we interviewed more than 3,200 people over the course of that. So it's a longitudinal study of that data, and it started out to be. So we did the same study at 10 years with the same data, and we thought, what else is in there? So we decided to go back and look, and we used AI. So we use a really cool AI tool that can do lots of different forensic look at data and quantify qualitative data. And when some of the correlations came back, what they call drill sites around correlating honesty and truth-telling and things that could predict that, I thought, oh, that could be interesting. So we went back and dug lots of different wells in the data and indeed found these 4 factors. So the goal was to publish the research. So we wrote up the 4 factors, published the research. It was invigorating, and we're done. But then people could come in and ask, hey, could you run the Theranos case through your findings, or could you run the college admission scandal through your findings? Which, of course, that's about as exciting as a proctology exam. And so we did a couple, and it was just really depressing. And we thought, could we have found 4 findings of what predicts honesty that nobody's doing? Because that would suck. And so I thought, I now need to find out, like, did we create a set of conditions that nobody can live up to? So that's not helpful. And so we sort of reversed the look to say, are there stories of executives out there, organizations out there, in fact, embodying these 4 principles? And they came out of the woodwork. Like when you start looking and turn the kaleidoscope that way, they're everywhere. And these heroes just kept showing up, both in the business world, but also in the not the business world. And when I realized how incredible those stories were, that's when we decided to say, that's a book worth writing. And so, to be honest, it's a book of heroes. It's a book of leaders and organizations who people I want as my boss, companies I'd be proud to call my employer, people who have lit the path to say, look, our world is stuck in a trust recession. People are desperate to find out how they can trust people that have proven themselves otherwise untrustworthy. Who's setting the example for us? And that's who they are. So the 4 things we found, one was be who you say you are. We all have mission, vision, purpose. We have statements that we make about ourselves. Yeah. Turns out if the lived experience of those words don't match the actions, you're 3 times more likely to have people lie to you. So the interesting, the statistical models work both ways. So if in fact your actions and words do match, you're 3 times more likely to have people be honest. But if all they are cosmetic words on the wall, what you've told people is it's okay to be duplicitous. Around here, we say one thing and do another, which people will be glad to follow that example and be self-serving and do what they want to do no matter what you tell them. The second one was accountability, the word that makes us all wince and all of our orifices tighten. Turns out that when accountability is laced with justice and dignity, meaning it's fair, meaning no matter who I am and however I show up here, I can be as successful as anybody else, and my work is treated with dignity, even the places I fall short. When that's the case, you're 4 times more likely to have people be honest. But if I'm just a cog in your wheel, if I know the system is rigged, if I know there are privileges and roles I don't have, now you're 4 times more likely to have me be honest. Because for me to be successful here, I have to embellish my accomplishments and I have to hide my mistakes. The third was governance and how decisions get made. So if I walk into a room of people, commonly referred to as a meeting, and what's happening in that room is an honest exchange of ideas. People are debating different points. The person in the front of the room is presenting a balanced view of some problem or challenge or opportunity. And if I want to offer a point of view that's different than the one prevailing in the room, I feel free to do that. That's a transparent set of governance. Now you're 3.5 times more likely to have you be honest. But if I walk into that room and I know it's just orchestrated theater, There's already a decision that's been made. Everybody's just nodding their heads. The person in the front of the room is trying to get everybody to nod their heads in a certain direction. And the last thing I think you want to hear from me is a point of view that differs than yours. Now you're 3.5 times more likely to have me lie. Because for me to get the truth, I have to go underground to get it. And the last one which was probably one of the most surprising to us, was border wars, the cross-functional world of organizations where supply chain meets operations, where sales meets marketing, and you have border wars. The seams of the organization are where all of your competitive value gets created. So if at your seams, there is cohesion, conflict can be resolved. People see themselves as part of a bigger story. I understand the value we create together. There's no we's and they's. There's just we. When that's the case, you are 6 times more likely to have people be honest. Because now I'm not worried about a single source of truth. But if I come to that border and it's we and they, now my goal is to make sure that people know that you're wrong and I'm right. When you fragment the organization, you fragment the truth. So now we have dueling truths. Now you're 6 times more likely to have people be dishonest because I have to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. The interesting thing about the statistical models also is that they're cumulative. So if you're good at all 4 of those things, you are 16 times likely to have people be trustworthy and honest. But if you suck at all 4 of those things, you are 16 times more likely to put yourself on the cover of a newspaper headline in a story you never wanted to be in.
Mm.
Oh.
Wow. That's so incredible.
Yeah.
And it just my head's spinning with lots of things that come from that. But I gotta ask you. You also you put something on the website I was looking at yesterday, and it struck me about office politics, and that like 50% of newly appointed executives don't trust their new peer set, and that's coming into the organization. Why is that?
So that data, interestingly, comes from our 10-year study on power, on people rising up to positions of influence and how they use that power or don't. So think of it as organizational altitude sickness, right? You go up higher in an altitude and the air is thinner. When I get up higher, people who used to be my bosses are now my peers. I have no reason to be confident that my well-being is in your interest. You probably see me as a threat. There's going to be some form of organizational hazing that I'm going to have to go through before you accept me. I'm now an extra competitor to whatever job you want.
Okay.
And in an environment that's already politically charged, where it's my hyper individuality that set me apart to get the job in the first place, and now that individuality is a liability. But if my peers don't know that, and they're still competing with me, now I have a boss who has to figure out how to coalesce this choir of individualists. I'm looking for the rules, right? How do I be successful here? And until I get a cue from you that you understand that my success is intricately tied to yours, I'm not going to trust you.
Does that roll over though too? And in these organizations that do this really well, is it the same dynamic when you go into an organization that even does that? It is. Okay.
Yeah, because we've known for 20 years that 50% of leaders who rise up in organizations fail in the first 18 months. Not a new statistic. It's recruiters love it because it's an annuity for them, but everybody else, the carnage to careers, the carnage to families, the carnage to it's terrible. And so organizations that have realized the investment in moving people along to broader levels of responsibility understand you have to put scaffolding around them to help them be successful. That it is no longer an automatic stick the landing.
Okay.
This is interesting because when you put the definitions around it, you make sense because we've all seen it. We've all experienced some degree of this like trust losing and gaining over time. What, I guess, is there a perfect scenario? Is there like a perfect like working condition where everybody gets along, even if people are moving up and down, or do these titles have to be removed?
Well, organizations have systems, right? They have governance, they have decision rights, they have cultures. And those environments systemically either reinforce or discourage certain behaviors. The great news about what we found in the To Be Honest research is that it isn't an all or nothing proposition. right? So take accountability. You can improve your just and fair accountability systems by 30% and get a 12% hit in honesty, right? So think about the continuum on a stereo of equalizer, bass, and treble, right? You can move these things along and get improvements. You don't have to be perfect, which is good because every organization is going to have subcultures. They're going to have bad actors. They're going to have people who do stupid things. But part of what we wanted to understand was, what are the systemic factors that take an otherwise, like 5,000 people didn't wake up at Wells Fargo all one morning and say, hey, here's an idea. Right? That took 10 years to get people to go to the dark side. Those people started out as good-hearted, caring people who, if you had asked them 10 years earlier, do you think you'd ever participate in something like this? They go, no way, I'd never do that. Suddenly, the line keeps moving, right? And so part of what we wanted to learn was, what are the conditions that take people to the dark side? And turns out, when you institutionalize duplicity, when you have cannibalistic accountability systems that make people feel like Darwinian cogs in your wheel and used, when you have decisions that get made in mysterious ways, and when you have people who are rivals to get resources, turns out you turn people into crooks and cheats and liars. But they don't all start that way.
You mentioned some really big companies, Patagonia, Microsoft, and the research. What's interesting about that to me is, I can see in a smaller company, in a smaller organization, that this would be easier to do, that you could change your culture quicker, and you could change people and change the way you operate. But it seems to me in a big company like Patagonia or Microsoft that's such a monumental task to create a culture like that.
Yeah.
How did they do? Like, how did that? Is that? Yeah.
Part of what I wanted to do was I wanted to dispel the myth. I mean, so if you look in the B Corp population, right? People are going to go, well, sure, they were all born that way,
right?
And I wanted to dispel the myth that big companies couldn't do it. PepsiCo is one of our examples in there as well. Satya Nadella inherited an absolute mess. He inherited a Darwinian, horrifically toxic culture from Ballmer. And I've been in meetings when they were a client of ours for years, where Ballmer was at the meeting, and I saw what went on there. Satya took his executive team away in their first few months of being a team, put them on couches and chairs, took them away from a conference table, made them wear jeans. And he said, we need to flip the script here. I want you to tell me, if Microsoft worked for you, how is Microsoft a platform for you to live out the reason you're on the planet? He knew that if he was going to connect 200,000 employees' everyday experience to a conviction about how they wanted to serve the world, he had to start with his team.
Oh.
And his own personal compassion, his own vulnerability. Kathleen Hogan, who's become a dear friend of mine, she's an interviewer in the book. Incredibly humble and compassionate woman. He appointed people that were going to embody the values he wanted, and they've worked to change that culture dramatically. They would tell you the first to say they're not all the way there yet, but he was determined. And in 7 years, his first 7 years, got so much further than I think he ever thought he would. But
people were hungry for that, though. They were hungry.
They were starved for it because there had been this Darwinian dog eat dog. He said, we have to go from being a culture of know-it-alls to a culture of learn-it-alls, right? Growth mindset became their platform for how they were going to change. They had people were being punished. You showed up with the rehearsal for the rehearsal for the rehearsal with the deck for the rehearsal of the deck before, and you had piles of notes to every possible scenario, to every possible question that you might possibly be asked, and it was just institutionalized neuroticism. And he knew that he was killing people, and so he cleaned it all out. Said, "Don't come with decks. Don't come with pages. Come with I don't know, but I'll find out. But don't perform for me." And you can imagine the first couple of years had to be just bloody, because the people for whom that old culture served well, who had been successful in that culture and had learned it, and for whom it was in alignment to their values. Right? We're certainly not going to lie down with a white flag when the good guy showed up. And so you had to imagine, and he wanted to give everybody a chance to succeed. And of course, not everybody could.
Right.
But you look at what they've done now and who they're becoming now. And it's just a stunning example of what happens when you have people at the top very committed to creating an environment where humans can thrive.
Yeah. Any other surprises? I mean, that really, once you got deep into what they're doing.
One of the things that surprised us was that honesty. So we looked at a ton of neuroscience. We talked to a lot of brain scientists and looked at brain scans to understand how does this play out in our body. And between the social sciences and the neurosciences, it turns out honesty is not a character trait. It's not a set of principles or values. It's not a values-based experience in life. It's a muscle. It's actually a capability. You have to be good at it, and you have to be good at it. You have to work at it. It's also, it's not just about telling the truth. What if you look at the neural pathways in our brain that connect to truth, justice, and purpose? Honesty means saying the right thing, doing the right thing, and saying and doing the right thing for the right reason. Truth, justice, and purpose. If you do just are candid, you might get labeled as candid or reliable. But to earn the moniker of honest, you have to do all three. And to be good at all three, it's a daily practice. You have to decide every day, I'm going to work on honesty today this way, which is one of the roots of what makes people dishonest is the lies we tell ourselves. So one of the things that Aisha and I've been working on Design the Honest Life You Love, which is what are the lies we've told ourselves that we then have to go out believing. And so you have to start with your own self-deception. To be true to yourself, you have to be true about yourself.
That's
powerful. And to be honest, you have to be honest about the things that bring you to your dishonesty. So one of the examples I have leaders I do in workshops, I say to leaders, go back over your calendar for the last 10 days. And in the privacy of your own heart, pick out 5 or 6 moments where if there was a video camera watching you, you would not want it to be used to train your children. Pick out 5 or 6 moments where you behaved in ways that would belie what you say you value. You were snide to the barista. You embellished data to your boss. You withheld feedback from somebody because you didn't want to deal with their defensive reaction. Whatever it was, pick it out. And if you examine those moments honestly, you will see a pattern. The moments that bring us to our dishonesty are not random. They're choices we make, subconsciously sometimes, because they serve a purpose. We believe they'll engineer a certain reaction. We believe they'll make us look a certain way. We believe they'll make us feel safer around certain environments. We do them for reasons, and they become incredibly reflexive, and we don't think about them. And so they become our truth. We live in a world today that confuses speaking your truth with speaking the truth. They're not the same.
Amen to that.
And when we don't interrogate our truth, we accept as if it's true, often when it's not. And so to look at the places where we've told ourselves lies, I'm seen a certain way. I'm inadequate this way. If people knew this about me, they wouldn't love me. When you look at those deeper truths, you find the places where your own dishonesty makes you less trustworthy than you think.
Wow.
This is a random question, but is it something you can point out? Like, can you guide someone else to do that? Right? Can you manage up and down and get people to do that?
I have, so Rhett and I have a common friend of mine, Aisha, and she and I do workshops called Design the Honest Life You Love. And we have been shocked. We had the very first workshop we did had Mark Ryder was in it. Our friend Mark Ryder was in it. 20 people all over the world, 8 different countries from 3 continents. They've never met before. And suddenly they're in breakout rooms. And the questions we ask are, what's the lie you've told yourself that is holding you back? And I mean, I think our world has become so isolated. I mean, the Surgeon General just declared it. Isolation's a pandemic, right? The things that they disclose, that they find out about themselves, the things they dig up, childhood traumas and certain ways they believe people don't see them. I mean, just levels of frankly, heartache. And to say, what if that narrative got restricted? What if it said something different? What if you believed something else about yourself? What would that look like? And just giving people permission to sort of let go of the lies the ghosts that have haunted them for so long, and think about something different. Watching this happen in 6 hours, Aisha and I are just like blown away. So, Cynthia, I have leaders do this exercise all the time. And when they go over their calendars, you see these red faces come up like oh, oh. And then I ask, and if you show that list to your spouse, what would they tell you?
Here's a couple things to add. I'm just kidding.
They would certainly have things to add, and they would probably say, this is not new news to me. I've had a front row seat to this performance for a long time. I'd love for you to change it.
I love you, but I want you to change it.
I love you in spite of it and not because of it.
And of course, the problem becomes, Cynthia, it's a really smart question because the problem becomes for a leader to face into the leader has built an entire life around these lies. So if I built my life and my leadership around a lie that says, for a decision to be good, I have to make it. And suddenly I realize, that's gotten me into trouble before. I should be more empowering. I have built a team of yes men around me who tell me what I want to hear and don't want to make a decision because they're afraid of me. They're not going to suddenly become empowered overnight. When I say, no, I've decided I've had an epiphany here. I'm going to delegate. They're not going to go, yay. They're going to go, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to do that?
Yeah. You've trained me to not be accountable for decisions by relying on you to make them all. And I can bitch about that all day long about how micromanaging and disempowering and in my weeds you are, but I like it there, if I'm honest. And suddenly having to be exposed to say, wait, you want me to make choices now? And then have to stand up behind them and be accountable for them? Because suddenly you decided to be honest with yourself? Didn't sign up for that.
I went through this, I feel like, with someone, and they were like, stop hugging all of your responsibilities so tightly. You got to let go. And what you're talking about is, and I know like the trust piece, how, and I kind of touched on this at the beginning of the interview. How do you trust people who have shown you, maybe someone's worked for you for 5, 6, 7 years, and 3 years ago, they weren't someone you could trust to do something, but now they might be. Can you retrain yourself to see them differently? Or
it's a great question, Cynthia. You have to be honest with yourself about what made you chose to not trust them, and to really distinguish between is it that you withdraw in trust, so there's distrust there, or just that you don't trust them enough. Because the trust is a currency, right? I trade in trust based on your character, or maybe it's your personality, maybe it's your competence. Maybe it's how much I think you're like me. There's all kinds of reasons I trade in trust different than yours. If I don't know what currency you're trading in, I may try to earn your trust in a way that you don't give it. So I have to decide, is the amount of trust between us commensurate with what our relationship requires? So if there's a lot of complexity and a lot of risk in our relationship, it requires a lot of trust. It may just be that there's not enough trust there. Or it may be, I think you're a liar and a cheat, and I've withdrawn trust from you because I don't trust your motives. But I may be wrong. And so I have to interrogate, is it that you remind me of my mother? And it's just a big transference party here, and you trigger me. This actually happened with a client of mine. I was the third coach in a line of executive coaches behind an executive they were trying to say, but he was just he was a harsh man. And he treated his team, he was just harsh. Some of it was cultural because he was not American born. And I thought, well, why would you even bring a third coach and just fire him? Like, why would you do that? Did my data collection, did my diagnosis. And there was one particular woman on the team he was more mean to than anybody else, which I thought, okay, that's weird. Why would you randomly pick her? And he had hired her to be his successor. And she had her own issues. She was not blameless in this, but it was just weird that she brought out worse behavior than him than others. And so I said, why do you treat her differently? He's like, no, I don't. I'm like, well, I've kind of watched it. You do. He hadn't even seen it. I found out. So I asked him about other women in his life. I wanted to understand his relationship with his mother, his relationship with his wife, sisters. I wanted to understand who is she in the story? Because it's clearly not her, right? Turns out, 5 months earlier, he'd been divorced. I said, tell me about your ex-wife. Didn't want to go there. Anger, yeah. Just he became a very angry, dark man in that conversation. But what he was describing about what he couldn't stand about her was this woman. All of the behaviors she displayed, they were actually very effective behaviors. Some of them were not. Some of them were a little bit whiny and maybe a little needy, whatever, because he made her insecure. And so her insecurities just triggered his ex-wife, right? So we had this little loop going here. And I don't know how two other coaches missed that. It was kind of obvious. I said, you need to really step back here and understand who she's triggering in you and understand that you're predisposed to treat her badly because of that. He never saw it. Right? So was she untrustworthy? No. Were some of her behaviors ineffective? Sure. But we had a whole other story going on here that had nothing to do with her at all. You don't interrogate those stories, interrogate those behaviors, you don't find them.
Let me ask you the question, because we're talking about the internal workings of an organization and how that plays out and how that comes. But what's really interesting to me is it seems, and I don't know the numbers on this, and maybe you have looked at this, but is there an ROI of this? In other words, is there a payoff for Patagonia? Is there a payoff for PepsiCo? Is there a payoff for Microsoft in the market? I mean, does it come back?
You know what? I wanted to handle that right in the front of the book, because I thought, if this becomes a mushy, touchy-feely, whatever thing, turns out the more honest companies, the companies that behave with integrity, the companies that commit to their purposes and actually live them out, the companies that do these four things well, outperform their competitors in every metric you care about: brand loyalty, stock price growth, by factors of 100 on the S&P 500, customer loyalty, margin, product margin, EBITDA, return on capital. We looked at every possible metric and compared scores of companies to one another, to their non-behaving that way peers. And these weren't like close margins, right? These were like by leaving them in the dust margins.
Okay.
Every factor you care about that you want to measure performance by, financially or otherwise, the more honest companies dramatically outperform their less honest peers.
Why? Like, I mean, where is the customer? Does the customer see it? Is it because the employees are more engaged? What's the cause?
You're going to get more innovation. You're going to get better service. You're going to have better ideas. You're going to retain better talent. Mm-hmm. You're going to be more courageous in the marketplace. You're going to be more honest about what customers you shouldn't be serving, and you're going to say no in your strategy to the right things. You're not going to be trying to be all things to all people. Right. And you're going to be honest about where you suck. And when something goes wrong, you're going to address it and fix it. So you're going to have the best talent doing the best work, driving the most innovative solutions to the customers who most want. Plus, consumers have said, I will be brand loyal until I find a reason to defect. If you lie to me, if you say one thing and do another, if you treat the environment poorly, if you make a product that I can't trust, I will bail on you in a minute, even if I've been with you for 10 years.
Yep.
So consumers are voting with their feet anyway. Customer, if it's B2B, your customers are saying, I don't need to be loyal to you because there's someone across the street doing the same thing.
Right.
So, the level of performance you get from those four factors is huge. And so why wouldn't you want to behave that way? Beats me. But there are lots of companies out there who aren't.
This conversation deserves another 30 minutes, maybe more, 3 days. I don't know. So we definitely have to end with how do people work with you? Because I feel like this is something you can accidentally fall into. I feel like every time you change a role or a position or your seat in the room, you can easily identify with the position and not with the truth. If that's how I'm kind of seeing well-intended people end up here. But
it's such a good point, Cynthia. Well-intended people don't even, they're on a slippery slope. They don't even know they're on. We have an assessment tool. So if people go to tobeHonest.net, we have a tool that can help you assess how honest is my team. We also have there, we videoed all of the heroes. So all the interviews I did that I knew I wouldn't be able to use the material. We created a news magazine TV show called Moments of Truth. And so there's a 15 episodes you can binge watch where you get to meet all the heroes and hear the backstage stories that they told me. So Hubert Joly and Rob Bilott, the lawyer that took down DuPont, Amy Edmondson, Jonathan Haidt. So there's a cast of characters that will inspire you. You can binge watch all 15 episodes in a weekend there. So that's certainly a place to start to look at your own journey. Come hang out. At navalent.com, our website is full of videos and tools and free ebooks and all kinds of stuff to get you thinking about your own leadership and how you show.
We'll put those in the link at the show and during the show. One quick question: are you working on anything new? Any new projects, or you can tease us with?
Why do you ask that? I'm toying with the idea. So I just finished a TEDx talk on building trust in a polarized world. How it is in a place where we all start angry. We all start assuming I'm right and you're wrong. We all start assuming your values are bad and mine are good. How do we show up in that world? Because none of us like it. We'd all say this sucks. It's terrible. We're not that different. Blah blah blah. But somehow we keep gorging on the diet of fragmentation and isolation and hatred.
Right.
And I have started looking at what is the relationship between how I don't trust myself and how I decide not to trust you. How do the lies I tell myself make me show up in a way that makes me not trust you? I think there's a there. And I'm digging. I'm sort of playing with the notion of, how do I be true? If we all say we want to be true to ourselves, we want to be our authentic selves. We all have all the words, and yet you can't be true to yourself if you're not going to be true about yourself. And so, how do we do that better? Because I think I look at the vitriol. Pick the line: political, religious, socioeconomic, race. Pick whatever the line is, and the vitriol seems to be around me deflecting my crap and wanting to point at yours. And a made up version of yours at that.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I were to sort of look in a mirror differently, and I saw myself differently, that would lead me to see you differently too.
I feel like I'm obsessed with you, and I don't know if that's my why. Maybe you remind me of something. Like now I have to read all this, but I think you are onto something. And if you're looking for people to study,
I may be.
I'm sure we can find a few who are out there seeking the truth about themselves. So
I may be.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, guys. Always good to be with you, Brett.
You want to take us out, Cynthia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you again, Ron. Thanks again, Rhett. I'm Cynthia Johnson. This is Rhett Power, and we are Bestseller TV. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much.